Welcome. It is 1 o'clock on the West Coast, Tug Nation time in this now. We're going to take a moment to sink into the now, settle into our bodies. Come into the present moment. First with an awareness, the sensations, then with an appreciation for our ability to perceive and feel. And if we get caught into a story, we get pulled into some thoughts of, ooh, I forgot to, I shoulda, ooh, so let me make sure I remember to, or maybe some narrative that takes you out of the now. Just see it as a little film strip flying through the air and let it pass on by, leaving you with just this now again. Thank you, universe, for this now, this constant, perfect now. Help us to appreciate it. Amen. I am ever so appreciative of the now today. It's always today when it's now. I went to the Wisdom 2.0 conference the last few days, and so I was probably more focused on the now, at least in the study of the now and the concept of the now and mindfulness and meditation, than I ever have before. And that isn't to say that I was meditating more than I ever have before, but more in conversations about and discussions of, and hearing true masters and leaders in the field of mindfulness, in the field of appreciating the now. I even got to see Eckhart Tolle speak, the author of The Power of Now, and a true, enlightened being in the now. It was interesting. My experience with him years ago was given and read The Power of Now, and it rocked my world. So simple and yet so revolutionary. And then I went and listened to his audiobook of The Power of Now. And if you've never heard Eckhart Tolle, he's got a thick accent. He's kind of an unusual looking man. And I just could not get into his, him reading his book just did not. I was like, I kept zoning out. I'm like, man, it's such the perfect message with an imperfect messenger. That was my perception or my story around him. And so I, got less into him as being one of my teachers that I went to. And I now realize that I maybe did not give him a fair shake, because when I got to see him speak this weekend, he was so funny, so present, so charismatic, so adorable. He kept making jokes and making funny faces and took out his phone and was like, I'm taking a selfie, and it was a beautiful thing to see, especially since he wasn't telling stories. He was allowing words to come forth. When you would ask a question, he would just let these answers come forth. And one of the first questions asked of him, he did a 30-minute talk and then was interviewed. And one of the first questions of the interview was, how come it's so different when you speak versus when some of these other teachers speak? And he said that, he goes, sometimes when I'm getting ready to go on stage, I'll think, what am I going to talk about? And I get into my mind. But by the time I got on stage, I was no longer in my mind and I was in the present moment. He's not speaking this fast at all. He speaks a little slower, and the words just come out. And so it's not like you're reading the words he's saying, you're experiencing his presence in the now. he had a few other things that really, he said that he doesn't use the word mindfulness because mindfulness as a description of meditation or being present, it talks about the mind, and the mind is what takes you out of the now. He says he likes to use the word presence, which I liked. Today I just wanted to share some of my reflections of this weekend at Wisdom 2.0, which is, it's a technology and business and mindfulness discussion there. So there's lots of people there from technology companies, lots of people from Facebook and Microsoft and Google, and then all sorts of coaches and mindfulness trainers, and really interesting collection of people. I saw a powerful talk by Arianna Huffington, which I did not expect. My perception of her was as a political pundit. And I know the Huffington Post, but I don't know. I just thought that was her business. But her talk was really amazing, and it was really talked a lot about her path and her journey. And she said that, when she was building the Huffington Post up in the beginning days of it, at one point she collapsed from exhaustion, woke up, hit her head on her way to the ground of collapsing, needed stitches, and woke up in her own blood and was like, I was just on the cover of a magazine, I was named one of Time's 100 most influential people. People think I'm successful, but clearly I'm not succeeding. There's got to be another measuring stick. And sometimes we talk in Hug Nation about the idea of that traditional measuring sticks of power or wealth or fame or status, are not enough. And so her new book is called The Third Metric, meaning this way of measuring success in non-traditional terms, in terms of peace, in terms of, happiness and joy. And I thought that was so cool. And so she shared a lot of transitions, things that she did in her life, which it's one thing to hear Eckhart Tolle say, oh, I rarely answer email, I only check my phone a couple of times a day. Well, duh, your job is as, floating being of light. It's easy for you not to go online. You're like a monk. But Arianna Huffington runs a newsroom and has a tech company, and and so she said a few things that she shifted in her life when she realized that she needed to make some changes. One was she stopped being a pundit on the news. She stopped going on TV to feed into the traditional news system. She also set up her bedroom as a device-free zone. She does not bring her phone into her bedroom. And it's funny how many people that was struck with. So she says, do not use your phone as your alarm clock. Get an alarm clock. Because if every time you check the time or you look to see what time it is, you also see your notifications, your new emails, what your text messages, then you're never disconnected. And so I left there going, I got to get an alarm clock and I got to get a watch. I need to stop the habit of always checking my connection device anytime I want to know what time it is. And so she was big on establishing, at the Huffington Post, her staff is not expected to check their email after 6 p.m. or on the weekends. They are expected to check, to disconnect from their responsibilities, recharge, and then jump back into it. And that's one of those things that is, I think, an easy philosophical thing to say, but very challenging when you are in the entrepreneur, startup, business person mode. It feels like that you will be putting yourself in a disadvantage if you let time pass. You between if someone needs something, you need to respond to them immediately. Otherwise, you might lose the opportunity, or you put yourself behind, or whatever. But the kind of tone of this whole conference is that burnout and stress and focus challenges are becoming such a big problem that it actually is not more productive, and it is not a benefit to any project or enterprise to say we're going to bypass downtime, we're going to bypass stillness, so that we can just work. That the long-term effects will actually hurt you more. And the cool thing about this conference was that there was a number of scientists and people who were doing studies to say, look, the days of meditation and stillness and mindfulness being a California wacky thing are just, we're so beyond that. There's hard science that says that companies that start the day with or not companies, but like people, after they do a mindfulness or a stillness practice, are able to focus better, are able to stay less stressed, are able to produce more. And so it's like, it is worth the investment of non-productive time, so that the productive time actually is productive. And that is, it was awesome to see this many companies and leaders, business people, etc., kind of all getting on board. There was a congressman there that had written a book on mindfulness and gave a really rousing talk. And I realized that I'm not as educated on the language of mindfulness as I thought, because mindfulness in this context was predominantly about meditation. And although they did, in many of the talks, they talk about meditation is merely being present. So meditation doesn't necessarily mean like this. Eckhart kept saying, like, he was billed as leading a meditation. He goes, this isn't the kind of meditation that you have to listen to, like, go, it's just a practice of being present. And so a number of the speakers mentioned how, well, meditation isn't the hours a day that you sit in stillness. It's about the all-day practice of trying to be present. One of the coolest things about the conference was that in this context of all these conversations about presence, I found that the conversations that I had with people during the lunch hours or between sessions were very deep and present. And I mean, the kind of person that's going to go to a conference like that is obviously interested in some pretty deep things, but it was also it just felt like the momentum of the vibration of this setting was such that zoom. There were a few times when I got a little hectic, and I got nervous a bunch of times, and I got shy a few times. I met a lot of people, but if I was like going to be critical of myself, I wish I would have introduced myself to more people. So the thing, I posted this last night or this morning something about how the conference was unsettling for me, and what I meant by that, or what I was alluding to, is that it really put a mirror in front of me and my life and my peers and my family and my work. And I saw this life in this world that I live in a crisis type way. Kind of like if you ever like oh my gosh, like global climate change is real. It was kind of like I went, oh my gosh, the hustle bustle, crazed information overload is real, and I am very much in need of help. I don't mean like I need help. I need to make changes. I struggle with staying away from Facebook for long periods of time. And there's all this science that demonstrates how the feedback loops work on your brain chemically in ways much like other addictive products processes do. And so not only was the talks and things I saw showed me that yes, I do these things. Like there was all science that would show that not only are people doing this, but here are the effects of it. We can measure people's productivity go down. Here's how we can measure their their achievement go down. They did the study of students, and students that check Facebook have lower grades than students that don't during while they're studying. And I just it was they had nothing that said like if you have more than 4 tabs open, it has an effect on your productivity. And I was like, well, okay, that might be true with 4 tabs, but let's say you have 40 tabs. Like, that's got to be better, right? That's got to be like full circle, like all the way, maybe? So, and then the other thing that I thought about was there was a number of sessions about, children. And I've been thinking lately about the difference between my childhood and my nephew's current childhood, and how we didn't have a VCR. So we could watch certain television programs if we were allowed to, which wasn't, daytime, we weren't allowed to watch TV. So most of my childhood was outside or playing with toys or, playing with action figures, playing, army men or Greek. We had Greek gods for a while because we had a teacher that used to tell us Greek myths. And all these imagination games and all these role-playing type things, and so seeing the crazed desire of my nephews to play iPad games has been a little like, whoa. And I think that when I see how much struggle I have with being disciplined about my digital intake and with my with trying to bring stillness into this ever-present information availability, how hard a time I have, and yet I have the benefit of knowing better and knowing how much damage can be happening and knowing how much it can be hurting me, and I still have trouble with it. So I'm imagining, well, how can I mean, my nephews are in for a rough road if they don't get some real strict help or boundaries or something. And I kept thinking that, in this day and age when information and thoughts and things are just coming at you nonstop, and they're scientifically engineered to make you click more and play and that the need for a practice of stillness is every bit as critical for basic health as brushing your teeth or washing your body. And I think that this conference is encouraging, because I think that as the science starts coming out, it'll be like, look, you kids, you got to brush your teeth, you got to wash your body, and you got to sit still for a little bit. It's not a fix to a problem. It's part of the upkeep of a healthy body and mind. It just is. You don't have to make too strong an argument. Why do you have to brush your teeth? Well, because plaque builds up, you get cavities. Why do you have to clear your mind? Well, because thoughts build up, you find attention goes down, and access to your creativity start to lose access to that because you're unable to go deep. That might be a harder thing for a kid to understand. They also might not understand, plaque, but it is critical. And I'm gonna have to train myself like a rat or something, and give myself maybe electric shocks or pellets or something to help myself with the mindfulness. I've been trying to do since the weekend, when I'm on the plane, instead of like fumbling for, a game or a magazine, trying to like just be still for a few minutes here and there whenever I have a pause, and becoming aware of how my tolerance for pauses is so weak right now. So I don't know. There were times this weekend when I was like, I hit in the middle of Eckhart's talk. I went from like, this is great, I'm meeting so many great people, I'm learning so much cool stuff, to just like, oh, got really bummed out. And then finished up the conference with some really cool talks and interactions and meeting great people and being encouraged once again. So, but definitely feel like there's work, personal work in that will, anything that I'm involved with, whether it be Hug Nation or professional work things or personal interactions, that all of these things will be enhanced by a more disciplined practice of stillness and presence. Which is why, it came up over and over this weekend, when I would talk about what do you do? I go, well, this is what I do professionally, and I also do this weekly thing called Hug Nation that is, however I would describe it in different ways depending on the context, but one of the things it is a weekly opportunity to be present and to try to remember who I am, who we are, when we are at our most present place, when we are least in our stories and most in alignment with this present place, this clear state where things like service become clear, when things like love and oneness and connection just become kind of bubble forth from the stillness, when our stories are no longer pulling us into future or past. I mean, just that beingness. So I'm so grateful for this moment of mindfulness. Yes, it involves talking and sometimes thinking, but it is definitely an experience of presence for me. And as I started this broadcast today, running around trying to find my camera, my tripod, and I was just like, ugh, I got really stressed like right before the broadcast, and I was like, oh, how perfect. What a wonderful opportunity. Here I had a weekend of, reminders and training about being mindful, and here I am not, 12 hours after leaving, that I am whizzing around in thoughts about shoulds. And so thank you for this recalibration. Let's have a hug. So grab yourselves by the shoulders. Notice the feeling. Sometimes I get into the hug part, and it becomes a script almost that I go through in my head. But in case that happens to you too, as we grab ourselves, really notice the sensation of grabbing yourself and the feeling of your body, the softness and the firmness and the solid muscles and frame, that this living thing that takes you around to experience the world. John Kabat-Zinn, I think is his name, gave some amazing talks this weekend, and he said that, who are you? We think that we think of ourselves as what is in the body, but there's so much of the body is, your consciousness goes nowhere near it. Like, that you are not in control of any of the mission critical things of keeping you alive. Your breath, your liver, none of those things, you're not let anywhere near those things. I thought that was great. Like, right, who am I? So as I squeeze this body, I became aware, or I think of all the processes and things going on in this physical thing that are me, but are not the conscious mind me. It's just part of the natural cycles of life that happen to be inside the skin, that happens to contain my brain, which happens to be where I perceive the focus of my consciousness to be, because that's where the sensations are interpreted. But in stillness, the awareness of the I gets a little bit fuzzier, or maybe more clear, and the appreciation for the oneness beyond the skin becomes a little bit more deep. And in this oneness, I become aware of you, your body, your consciousness, your liver and your breath, just as I am aware of the streams and the photosynthesizing leaves and all these processes that, whether they are governed by conscious thought or not, are all part of this one thing, this one perfect universe system. Maybe we can relax into that, knowing that that to-do list is maybe not as important. The world wants to tell us with every message, this is important. This email says, this is important. This advertisement says, this is important. This text message says, this is important. And a little bit of stillness can maybe help us hear those messages with a little distance. Allow them to be thoughts that go through and not truths that we must respond to with panic. Is there a hungry bear on the other side of that message? No? Well, then it's not as important. It is information to be processed, just as a thought is to be processed. Don't believe everything you think. That was scrawled all over the place in pieces of art and t-shirts. So let's take 3 breaths together. On behalf of Grandpa Caleb and all love warriors, thank you for this now, for sharing this moment. Amen. Happy Hug Nation.